everyone, and welcome to the TestRail 6.5 webinar to cover what is new with this release. My name is Jon Reynolds. I am a product manager for TestRail, and I will be going through what is new in the TestRail release here. We also have Shanu in our chat console to answer any questions that you may have during the webinar. So our agenda for today is to cover what has changed in defect and reference plugins for TestRail. So this release is focused on our defect and reference plugins that are available for integrating with external bug tracker tools, requirements management tools. We also have an included update to drop-down menus with searchable drop-down menus, improving functionality for drop-down menus as you see them. We will also go through the new plugins that are available, which we also added with this release, and go through a demonstration of how the defect plugins work. So what has changed with our defect and reference plugins for TestRail? All integrations with tools have received either new or upgraded defect and reference plugins. So what does this mean? This means that you can now customize the fields which appear in the push dialog for any defect plugin, any tool that we integrate with using a defect plugin. Previously, this is only available with Jira. This has now been extended to our plugins for other tools such as GitHub, Assembler, etc. So you can now customize the push dialog for your tool that you have integrated with TestRail. You can now also customize the fields which appear when you hover over links. So previously this wasn't available with any tool. You can now customize the data which appears when you hover over a defect or reference ID to retrieve that information from your external tool. So you are not confined to a default set of fields. You can also include additional data, eliminating the need to leave TestRail to see additional information if you need it. We've also added custom field support to these tools. So not only can you use default fields that are configured by a default integration or a default configuration, you can also include custom fields. We've also added attachment support, so you can now push an attachment to your external tool. So if you need to add a screenshot to a bug report, you can do that just by dragging it into the push dialog and send it over to your tool to hopefully eliminate the need to navigate to that tool to update any additional information. Now, these last two items do have an asterisk next to them, as this support has been added where possible. All of these integrations utilize an API. So if the external tool, such as GitLab, doesn't support custom fields, then you won't be able to use a custom field in the push dialog or when link hovering. So all of these functionalities are based on what is possible with the external tools API. So just keep that in mind. If you're not sure whether or not the functionality has been added to your tool, it will be noted in the documentation for that tool. In addition to upgrading the existing plugins, we've added new plugins based on customer feedback and customer requests. We've added plugins for Asana, Azure DevOps, also referred to as Microsoft TFS, and Visual Studio Online. Microsoft has rebranded it all to Azure DevOps to cover both the server and cloud versions of those tools. GitLab, Trello, and VersionOne. So these 5 tools also have new defect plugins and reference plugins available. These plugins will also support the push and hover customizations, custom fields, and attachments, once again, where custom field and attachments are possible. So let's just take a look. We now have a full list of plugins I've got some animation here. Let me skip past the animation. There we go. All right, so all of the tools in this list are now tools where we provide a defect or reference plugin out of the box with TestRail. So both server and cloud versions using 6.5 or later will have access to integrations with all of these tools out of the box, only requiring you to set up your instance URL and API tokens or whatever credentials are needed to integrate with your tool. So as you can see, the Asana, Azure DevOps, GitLab, Trello, and VersionOne are new, but we also had 15 previous integrations available out of the box. Now we're up to 20. So let's just take a look at how these new plugins do work. I'm just going to go through a demo of each of the new tools. All of the other tools should pretty much work in the same way, but I'm going to cover the new tools just to show some functionality here. So first, we'll look at Asana, since it's in alphabetical order. Looking here, I have a basic test case in TestRail. So there are two types of plugins. You have a defect plugin and a reference plugin. So the defect plugin is used for the defects field and also this defects menu, allowing you to push a new defect to your external tool. The reference plugin affects the references field, which is found in test cases, test runs, milestones, and other areas in TestRail where you have the references field. So once again, the defects plugin affects anything where the defects field, which is in test results, or the push new defect dialog. The references field affects anything that is marked as the references field, so that would be based off the reference plugin integration. So here we have a reference ID, which is an Asana issue ID entered into this test case. So with the reference plugin integrated, I can hover over this ID and see information from Asana. This hover also provides a link directly to Asana. So I can click on this item and open it in Asana. So here in Asana, I have this test case already opened up for me to look at. So this information should match the information which appears in TestRail. So if I update this description real quick, I go back to TestRail and I hover over this ID again, I should see updated description, which I do. So all of this information is pulled live from Asana and populated into TestRail. So the references, that's how the reference plugin works. The reference plugin is primarily for link hovering over any entity in the references field. The defect plugin allows for link hovering over any entity in the defects field, and also affects the push dialog here. So we'll go to a test run. We'll just use the push dialog from within a test result dialog. So if I add result, I click on the push dialog. This opens up a new issue creation for Asana. So I can put in some information here. 60 today, I'm not going to attach a file this time, but I will just hit submit. And this will create a new item in Asana and automatically put the new ID here in the defects field. So I add result. The new test result is added. I can hover over this ID just like I could the reference ID, and I will get more information from Asana. So we can do the same thing with our other tools. So let's take a look at Azure DevOps. So here I have an Azure DevOps integration configured with a basic test case. I have a references field. Hover over this item. It gives me a project link, severity, and other information. I click on this link to open it up in Azure DevOps. So with just a little, this was an image that was embedded in Azure DevOps, but so this link just takes you directly to that work item in Azure DevOps. So I can change this title. We'll just change a simple title. If I go back to my reference hover, the title is updated here. So let's hop over to a test run, add a test result. So here with Azure DevOps, you have the Azure DevOps plugin is somewhat unique to some of the others. If you submit with a bug, there are some fields which are disabled. The way Azure DevOps functions, bugs, tasks, and issues have different fields which are available by default, such as the description field, the reproduction steps, or system info. So when you're using the Azure DevOps plugin, fields will be disabled if they are not available for that issue type. So here on a bug, we need the reproduction steps and system info. So I've got that here. So let's just say I'm using TestRail 6.5. Change the status. We'll assign it to somebody. And we'll set a priority. Submit. Move that. There we go. So I believe the status field was not something I could set for this issue type. So I went ahead and just disabled that field and was able to push the new defect. So I add a result here. And there's my defect. So yes, the status defaults to new. I couldn't set it to do based on Azure DevOps functionality. So here's our new item. I can click on this once again to open it up in Azure DevOps, but we've already seen how that works. So let's move on to GitLab. So here, once again, I have an item in GitLab with the reference ID. Click on this to open it up. There's our item in GitLab. So I'll just change this here. I'll just remove the link. Save some changes. Go back to TestRail, hover over it, and I have my updated description. I'm just demonstrating that these, changing this data does change what you see in TestRail. Looking at a test run. So here I have a defect entered. If I add a new test result, once again, open up push dialog. There's our push dialog for GitLab. I can add assignees, remove assignees. So there we go. Actually, I'll just change this to say passed. Hit submit. There's our new defect ID automatically captured. Hit save. And our new result with our defect ID. Trello is also somewhat unique here. The Trello integration allows you to push a new card to a list. So you're not going to create new lists with Trello's defect plugin. You're going to link to cards themselves. So here I have a reference ID. Unfortunately, the IDs for Trello are not very user-friendly, but these are IDs to the card in Trello. So here the card is located on the welcome board with a title and a link to the test case. This is just what was pushed in the description field. I can click on this link and I will be taken to the list, or actually the board inside Trello. So the links are not directly to that specific card because of just the way Trello works, and being able to link directly to a card isn't really possible. So if I go back to TestRail, here I'll use the defects dialog instead of going into a test run. So I can push something to any board that's available. I can push it to any list, so I'll just put it over in the tried it list. And then here's a new card in the list. Hit submit. So I push a new item. Now when using the push defect dialog, it provides you with the ID because you're not editing a test result. So it gives you the ID that you can copy and paste into any field here. So if I edit this references field, I'll just replace it. Hit save. So now I've edited my new ID, and there's my new card information, which I can go back to the Trello board, and there it is. So there's my new card that I just created. Finally, on the list of tools that we have a new integration for, we have VersionOne. VersionOne is similar to other tools. We have the reference plugin, allowing you to hover over an item ID and pull up information from it. We can open it in VersionOne. There we go. So this is a new item in VersionOne. So I can change, what did I click on here? I will change it to, I'm going to just change the type here. So we'll change the documentation. So that is done. So this is our item in VersionOne. If I go back to TestRail, hover over here, it's now type documentation. So let's use the push defect dialog, which we will use in within a test run. We can add a new defect here, push. We can also add a different issue types, put it in various projects, and hit submit. Add results. So this doesn't only handle defects, but it also handles issues and other item types within VersionOne. So that pretty much covers our new tools that we have integrated. We've created defect plugins for. So this functionality is available in various tools. So you can also customize within the plugin settings. There are some options to turn on and turn off various fields and also implement custom fields. We would definitely recommend looking at our documentation on a per tool basis to see, and also looking at the plugin settings to see what fields are configured by default and how to customize the plugin with custom fields, turning on, enabling or disabling attachments, etc. Each tool has its own set of documentation to cover how to customize and what is required if custom fields are supported and so on. So finally, we have in TestRail's new features, we also implemented searchable drop-down menus. In many parts of TestRail's UI, we've added the option to be able to search for items. So this is especially helpful for large lists or lists that are kind of hard to navigate through, such as version lists, a list of users. So if you have hundreds of TestRail users and you need to find somebody that you're going to assign a test case to or a test run, you can just quickly search through the user list to find that user instead of having to scroll through hundreds of users, etc. So we have implemented these searchable dropdowns in many parts of TestRail's UI. That said, we may have missed a couple of spots. So if you see a couple of lists where you think it would be very helpful to have the search functionality, let us know where in the UI you see this, and we can look at implementing that in a future release as well. We tried to cover off as many places as we thought were helpful. However, like I said, we may have missed a couple of spots. So just let us know if you see something that you would like to see the searchable dropdown implemented as well. So that pretty much covers it for what is new in TestRail 6.5. It may not look like a whole lot of new features, but we did update and redo 20 defect plugins for TestRail. So there was a lot of work put into this to accommodate teams that use any tool that that may need for integrating with defect trackers or requirements management tools. So let's move over to any questions that anyone may have. Shanu, do we have any questions that have come through in our chat log?
Yeah, John, there are a few questions which I would like you to address. The first one is, could you just show your configuration of either the defects or reference plugin of Azure DevOps?
So Azure DevOps. So here, I will zoom in a little bit here. So here is the integration for Azure DevOps. Uh, the plugin, when you initially select this plugin, I believe it says it's the URL for Visual Studio for the address. The address for the defect plugin actually needs to be dev.azure.com/your-organization. So this is noted in our documentation as well. But with this configured, I have my Azure DevOps user, the project I'm integrating with, and a password or API key. Here I have user variables configured, obviously to mask this information from being available to anybody who has access to this information. So user variables help prevent people from being able to see, other administrators from being able to see a password or anything like that that's entered into these connection settings. So we strongly recommend using user variables, and this will also allow each user to configure their own credentials so that the correct reporter is assigned to pushing defects. So when they create a new defect from TestRail, then the correct user is assigned to that item. So here we have the Azure DevOps plugin. It is unique because, as I mentioned during the demonstration, each tool, each issue type has its own set of fields applied to it. So by default, we just have the bug, issue, and task turned on. You could turn on Epic and user story if you would like. I don't know if there would be much of a use case for creating a new Epic from the push dialog, but that option should be there as well. The push.field section here shows the fields that are available by default, so you can turn these on or off as needed. And then as mentioned, so since the bug, a bug has the repro steps and system info, so these fields are disabled on the issue type level. This is the only plugin that has this additional type.settings section, but this is required for DevOps so that the plugin knows, so you're not accidentally submitting a description to an item that doesn't use the description field. Similarly, for hover fields, you have item type and other fields which are enabled by default. You can turn these on or off as needed just by changing the on-off value. You can add new fields such as custom fields, etc. For link hovering. So anything in the hover field section covers link hovering. Anything in the push field section covers the push dialog. And the same applies for references field. The main difference is the reference field does not have a push dialog, so you only have the hover field section. So I hope that kind of addresses, I hope I covered what you would wanted to see in the configuration settings. So do we have another question here?
There's one more question. Is searchable drop-down menus option available for custom drop-down menus?
It should be within test cases. So if you have, I'm going to scroll back out a little bit here. In test cases, any drop-down menu inside the edit screen for a test case should apply to custom drop-down, should apply to searchable. So here I do have a custom drop-down field. So yes, the searchable drop-down does apply to custom fields.
Okay. There's one more.
Sure.
Does the new version also offer improved user management? For example, the option to generate list of users and attached roles per project.
This release does not include anything user management related. We are looking at additional user management functionality in a coming release, hopefully in TestRail 6.6. but I don't want to go into specifics on what exactly would be addressed, but we are looking to improve some user management in our coming 6.6 release. Assuming everything goes well, and that's there will be more information, obviously, once that release is available. But there are not any user management improvements in this specific release.
There's one more. In Azure DevOps, defect plugin config, how to enter the user credentials in masked form. Is there any section to do so in TestRail?
Yes, I will go through in our documentation. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time covering how to do this. It's each of our documentation, you should have a list here for user variables. Each plugin does suggest using user variables, and we do have a documentation page dedicated to that. The link is available on the Azure DevOps and also in the integrate menu right here in the screen. So this tells you how to set up user variables and then insert the placeholders into the integration settings.
Okay. So I'm just looking at the list of the questions, which is there a difference between the Azure DevOps server and cloud version regarding the address and project?
Yes, the address will always be the address of your instance. So if you have Azure DevOps installed on a server, then you will need to use the address for your DevOps server. If it's on your local host or wherever it would be, yes, you do need to configure that that URL appropriately to be the endpoint of your server. TestRail does add on the necessary paths for the API. You only need the main server endpoint. And TestRail should be able to configure the rest. But there is another difference with Azure DevOps Server. With the Azure DevOps Server, there is no API for assignees. So you cannot assign issues from TestRail, assign new bugs to anyone from TestRail due to the limitations of the Azure DevOps Server API. Users for Azure DevOps Server are based on the Active Directory for that Windows server. So the API doesn't have an endpoint for assignees. That's just a nuance between the two plugins, but you can use Azure DevOps Server as a tool as well. You just have to configure the correct URL.
Yeah. I think I'm just trying to find the questions related to 6.5. So there's one question about, have you improved the installation and directions with 6.5? CentOS 7. Yeah.
Our installation instructions generally haven't changed with any Unix version. You just need to install the requirements. It's PHP with the required modules, the IonCube loader, and then install TestRail. The actual instructions really haven't changed. We provide general instructions because there are a multitude of Linux configurations you could use. But if you just on our installation requirements, if you meet the requirements, you should be able to install TestRail. I know CentOS 7 does have some additional security and restrictions, but you just have to ensure the proper file system permissions are enabled as well. But there isn't really any documentation change as far as installation is concerned with the 6.5 release.
Yeah. I think there's a question about when this version be available for everyone, or is it already available? Yeah. So
the server version is available or will be available we expect in the next couple of days. We have to update some Docker files and release the 6.5.1 version to server. All cloud instances are running 6.5.1 already. Now, there is a 6.5.0 release available for server. There were a few documented bugs on our forums that we did address in the 6.5.1 release, which we will be releasing in the coming days. I don't have an exact day yet, but we are planning to release it this week.
Okay. I think one more question. Do you have any idea to integrate with Ivanti Service Manager? I think this was not included in 6.5.
Correct. We don't have an integration set up for that. We'd welcome a feature request so we can look at that for a future release, but we do not have an integration for that tool at the moment out of the box. TestRail server, with TestRail server, it is possible to TestRail server, it's possible to write your own plugin based off one of the existing plugins, but that is not available for cloud at the moment.
Okay, I think, yeah, I think that's all. I'll just cross-check if we have missed anything related to 6.5. Yeah.
Okay, I do see a question from Roland that are there any changes in the Jira plugin? Yes,
Yeah.
we've introduced the customizable hover fields with the Jira plugin. If you are using the Jira plugin, you may need to reconfigure it. There's a minor change which may cause an error when trying to use the push dialog or link hovering, but reconfiguring the plugin will resolve that issue. We definitely recommend checking out our 6.5 release announcement with step-by-step instructions on reconfiguring the plugin, which just involves deselecting the plugin, saving it, and then reselecting the plugin and putting your credentials or configuration settings back in. This prevents an error. I believe it's caused by the component field, but just reconfiguring the plugin prevents that error, any errors from appearing. And that will also allow you to go forward with customizing what is shown when you hover over issue IDs. All right, and we're also, at about 35 past the hour here, so we can go ahead and wrap this up. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us either through our forums or by email, and we will be happy to help to answer any questions that you may have. And once again, thank you very much for coming and joining us today. My name is Jon Reynolds, and with us we had Shanu. And thank you very much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.